There we go.
It'll get going. Give it a second. This is stock. StreamYard stock stuff, buddy.
Classy.
We're doing it. We're live. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, the whole thing. We're everywhere.
Are you really on Twitter?
Well. Oh, yeah, dude.
Cool.
That's one of the
I didn't know people watch videos on Twitter.
Oh, yes. We're live on Twitter right now. It's actually one of the cool things about StreamYard is you get the multiple platforms at the same time. So
yep,
we've got obviously, we have a lot to discuss today. Dan Parker's here. If you guys don't remember Dan from last time he was on the channel, I'm going to include a link in the description. He's doing a lot of hard work out in the field to like put videos together about what's going on in San Diego, what neighborhoods you should be looking in, stuff like that. So definitely check it out if you're interested in content about San Diego real estate. We've got a bunch of stuff going on right now. Just the data that's coming in and everything's lagging, Dan. This is June data, that we're talking about, or we look at, the quarter for JP Morgan, which we're going to discuss that as well here in just a bit. And, just we're looking at stuff that's in the past. So we got to keep that in mind. But there are some big conversations that we're going to have today. And we're going to look at, this is the lowest sellers market index I've seen on Altos maybe ever. I've only been looking at it for a few years, but it seems to be falling pretty fast. So we're going to kind of dive into all this stuff. And I think, the biggest one, so Dan's a real estate agent here in San Diego. I'm a lender. We're both working in this market ourselves personally, boots on the ground. And I see this, this headline, which comes up, home sale cancellations jumped in June as buyers backed away. So roughly 60,000 deals. Really, this is all you need is the headline, this sub headline. 60,000 deals fell through. 15% of the homes that entered into contract fell out. Did you have anyone fall out, Dan?
I sure did. $2.3 million deal. So I had 3 under contract in the same week. That's right. That's absolutely right. So I had one fall through. I had three accepted escrows in 1 week. One fell through. Another one was kind of hanging by a thread for a first week and a half because there's just a lot of fear, especially at that point. There was a lot of fear in the minds of buyers.
Yeah, there's no question. And I think there's multiple reasons for this. And then one of them definitely is people who have been in the market to purchase for a long time and finally got into escrow and started to see that, the payment was higher than we were expecting. The house wasn't as nice as we were expecting. And you know what? We're just going to go ahead and bail on this. But also part of it, and I think probably the biggest part of it from what I've personally seen, is that we have people who are getting into escrow that aren't waiving everything. And if you're getting into escrow and you're not waiving your inspection conditions, you're not waiving your appraisal, you're not waiving all these things, then you have a chance to actually get out. And I would personally blame, I'm going to cast the blame here. I would personally blame sellers for this more than anything else. Unreasonable sellers. Not willing.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Not willing to give not an inch. We won't give you a single thing. No repair requests. Nothing. We won't bend at all. And buyers were just like, okay, sayonara.
Or even before the offer was accepted, if you had multiple offers and you're sending out multiple counter offers and trying to inch people up to their absolute max, well, guess what? That regret starts to sit in a couple days later. And they have the opportunity to back out. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think it had a lot to do with that. In fact, just from what I personally experienced, it takes sellers a little bit longer to come around, because they have such an emotional attachment to the asset and they really truly believe that it is worth what it was worth, a month or 2 or 3 ago when they got their first CMA and started talking about it. And it's just not the case anymore. And you may not have to give a ton. You may not have to give away the farm, but you have to be reasonable again. You have to be willing to listen to buyers and go, you know what? That's reasonable. They're right. We do need to fix that. That should be squared away. Those things should be handled for someone who's paying hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars for this home. They just need to be a little bit reasonable. And I think we'll see that this was probably just a one-off. I don't think you're going to see like 15% of escrows fall through in July, for example. But it is something that causes the fear train. It's fuel for the fear train. Like, oh, look, buyers are running from homes. They're running from the homes that they fell in love with. This is bad. And really, it's just sort of should be to be expected when a market shifts. This is part of the things that you see. Like if you were, for example, if you had an open market in a different country where they sell things on the street, and all of a sudden, things changed. Maybe there's 5 more vendors there now. People who had deals with you, they may strike deals with someone else. I mean, just it's a part of an open market, and it's a part of the process that we can't ignore. But I don't think that we can look at it and say it's unhealthy. I think what was happening prior was unhealthy when people were, buying homes 200,000 above list and waiving everything. That was unhealthy, in my opinion, Dan.
Absolutely. And a couple things to note on this article, and I sent you this article, but I didn't have a chance to read through the entire thing. But it was either this article or another one I read that said that the average is somewhere around 10 or 11%. So it's not like we went from 0 homes falling through up to 15. It's still like 40 or 50% increase. Yeah, maybe it says it in here.
The graph.
Okay.
So this is Redfin data, by the way.
There you go. So that it's pretty interesting to look at. It's still like a 50% increase or whatever it is, maybe more than a 50% increase from where we were at, but it still felt drastic as a real estate agent. I'm sure you were feeling that as well.
Yeah, it does. And when you look at the chart, it does seem like, okay, hey, on a typical month where we're seeing kind of the high sides of the 13%, we're dipping down to 11 or 12%. And then we had this COVID spike where we saw 17%. And that's what they're kind of referencing here is like, hey, this is the worst spike that we've seen since COVID. You can kind of see what happened there. And there's been more cancellations taking place as this data is revealed month by month, which is, probably the way it should be. And I mean, buyers do need to be as due diligent as possible, always, and the lack of due diligence, I think, was a problem. So the fact that we're getting back to that, I believe, is good. It'll take sellers a second, to wrap their heads around it. But I do think it's going to ultimately good. And by the way, we're live, all kinds of platforms. If you want to drop a comment, a question, go ahead and do so. We will come back to those a little bit later in the broadcast. We got a bunch of stuff to discuss today. We're going to run through so many things. And this is what I thought was funny. So I want to get your opinion on this. And so immediately right away, of course, me to say, hey, what you need to do about backing out of a home purchase when you're under contract. So, people say that it might be a conspiracy that I think mass media wants to crash. Oh, I don't know. Take a look at the headline here. They're not exactly promoting homeownership, but I mean, realistically though, Dan, all things aside, and I will include this link in the description if you want to check it out. But like, what are the things that you need to know when you're in contract about backing out, protecting yourself, those kinds of things?
Yeah. And what's interesting about this is, it's going to differ state to state. And it's going to differ the contracts. Here in California, you're going to have everyone's going to have the same boilerplate purchase agreement unless you're purchasing a new construction home. And in that contract, there are some protections that we have in place, unless, like you were just saying a little while ago, that you as the buyer waived your protections from these. But you're usually going to have an inspection contingency, you're going to have an appraisal contingency, and you're going to have a loan contingency, potentially even, a contingency on selling your house. So you could have all of these options to cancel the contract and still get your deposit back. So if you put in 1 or 2 or 3% deposit on the house, you're always going to put something, they call it the skin in the game. You're going to have, more than likely, you're going to have an opportunity to get that back if you were to stay within these contingency periods. Now, the thing to note is, myself as a real estate agent, I kind of need to tell my clients, like, there's no guarantee that you'll get that money back. You're going to have to talk to an attorney because it could always get it to that level. The seller could always try and protest and fight it. But the reality is there's not much ground for them to stand on. They have the right to do whatever they want. They have the right to talk to an attorney, but you as the buyer can basically back out of a transaction for more or less any reason within that inspection contingency period. So that you want to do your due diligence, you want to do your inspection, you want to do all of the investigations that you can so that you make sure that you're making a good investment. And if you feel like you aren't, then you either renegotiate or you back out of the deal.
Yeah. And you have to sign the release of these contingencies, right? So it's not like, I mean, I guess some back in the day, I think it was Zillow,
Yes.
You bought a house from Zillow, they would have like automatically removing contingencies or something like that. They would automatically be removed on these dates. You pre-agreed to it, but most contracts aren't that way. So you have to you have to take a step. You have to sign a document to remove your contingencies, right, Dan?
In fact, I would argue that's a big part of the reason why they failed at least in San Diego. I don't know about anywhere else. I only work in San Diego, but it was very scary for me and for my clients to be in a situation where you have an inspection contingency that is released automatically at 5 o'clock on whatever date. And guess what? It doesn't matter that the seller, that the agent, that everyone in the transaction, they're not they haven't responded to any questions you've asked in the last 4 days. It's just automatically going to be released. But yes, in a normal transaction, you have to sign off on that being released. And there's even more protections in there. There's a lot of protections for buyers in the California residential purchase agreement.
Yeah, I've never seen a buyer lose a deposit. I've never seen it happen. I know it has happened. It's very difficult to happen. You always want to try to stay in contract. You don't want to leave yourself in a position where you're out of contract. So definitely something to talk over with your agent in great detail and know, especially if you're buying new construction. They don't like to explain it to you in layman's terms. So you have to kind of say like, hey, when can I back out and not lose my deposit? When you have to specifically flat out ask these dates and try to get those things sorted. Let's see here. Oh, I was going to mention this one because, there definitely is I talked about this yesterday in my video, that there's the high end is where you see the shrinking happen first. And that can affect median price quite a bit, which is why I was debunking this article on CNBC about how the median price had gone down in these certain areas. And it's definitely something that is taking place, and it will affect some of those things. Even the average will be affected. The median will be affected in a major way. So demand for these bigger mortgages has shrunk the most, and that makes sense. It definitely makes sense if a market is softening, which we believe this market is softening, then the bigger houses, the more expensive homes are the ones that will probably need the biggest price cuts. And they're probably the most affluent sellers, the ones who have the least back against the wall kind of situation to sell.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that market will slow down first. And I think are you seeing that as well, Dan?
Yeah. So, I mean, just traditionally in real estate, the luxury homes, they're going to take longer to sell. There's going to be less demand. And it's like you're saying, it's not like someone, more often than not, it's not like, oh, they need that house today. It's like they want to find the best home that they can possibly find for their however much money they have. Nowadays, $1 million is not luxury in San Diego, but I was just looking at a statistic yesterday. I think it basically, from the way I was looking at it, made me feel like maybe 4 million is like the real luxury, like mansion homes in San Diego, starting at around 4 million. And I think the median, gosh, I don't know all the information right now because things have been changing so rapidly. But the average expected days on market right now, if you break it down per price point, is going to be way more drastic for these luxury 4 million plus homes. Whereas, homes around $1 million, what does it say here? Average days on market 29.
That's overall.
Oh, overall.
So, yeah, overall 29 days, but you're right. Yeah.
It'll go up to like 200 days for those $4 million homes.
Or there's a listing in Del Mar on 7th Street that has been there for years. I don't. It's like,
well, that definitely skews the data too, right?
Yeah, that does. It skews the data. It does, and that's why it's sometimes hard to look at these things. Although that thing has become a constant. I like this Altos research platform. It's the one I use. I like to use the same data sets to look at because I think that's important. Whether you're looking at one that's right or not, we don't know which ones are exactly right or not. We definitely
they can vary.
They can vary a lot. We need better data. Let's be honest. But at least if you use the same one, now you have something to go off of, something to compare to. How are things looking? By the way, we're live. If you want to drop a comment, ask a question, say what's up, feel free to do that. We will get to those later in the program. And this is, I like to look at this market action index. This was in the high 90s at one point out of 100. And it's not really buyer's market until you get down to the 30s, but it has been moving down pretty darn fast. The market action index here is now at 70, and in the end of March, it was at 89. So, we've seen a lot of movement towards things being good for buyers. I think that's what everybody's been noticing.
Hmm.
And we're starting to see some of these other data points also kind of go in that same direction. Average days on market sort of creeping up, to almost 30 days. Price per square foot has topped at 710, still at 693. So it's not like there's any like crash. There's no massive like anything crazy going on, but it's settled in a little bit. That's like a 1% or maybe a 2% drop in price per square foot. So just a little settling taking place there.
And I wonder, do you know if that's for homes that have sold? There's probably sold data, right?
Yeah.
So then the other thing to consider too is, I think this market really started to change really drastically about 5 weeks ago. And if you're looking at homes that have closed, then that means they had an accepted offer 5 weeks or more ago. So just something to consider when you're looking at this as well. Again, we talk about this all the time, and it's very apparent right now when the market is changing very rapidly. This is also another part of the reason why it's hard for sellers to know what to list their home at, and to just be realistic with the market, because you're going off of a home that closed yesterday. Well, they had an accepted offer a month or 5 weeks ago. So it makes all this stuff a little bit more challenging.
It's a good point. Yeah. And the data is always going to be lagging to some extent. So you have to take it with somewhat of a grain of salt, but you can see some of these more macro trends like price decreases. For example, at the end of March, we were at 7.71%, and now we're at 40%.
Yeah.
And that's like a national thing. Like the national data, is that like some of the top markets for price reductions are in the 40 to 50% of homes that are on the market that are seeing a price reduction. Personally, I think that's a good sign that sellers are starting to understand that it's not the same market anymore, and we need that so that we can find where the market is. Some people see this as a bad sign. Have you experienced a price reduction recently, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing them left and right now. And it really depends a lot on the house. It depends on the pricing strategy, but yeah, I mean, we're seeing homes sit on the market for several weeks. We're seeing some homes get price reductions. But I mean, still, the homes that are the nicest homes and the most competitive and priced appropriately are still getting multiple offers.
Here is properties with a price decrease.
Interesting.
So this goes back to, this is 3 years of data right
What's
here.
the dotted line versus the solid line?
The dotted is a 7-day average and the solid is a 90-day average. So you can kind of see, over the shorter term, there's been more going on.
Looks more drastic.
Yeah. And that makes sense. We can also pull up inventory on here. So you can see the inventory has increased a little bit there. Still not quite to where, it was going back into the end of 2019.
Yep.
But definitely more inventory than we've seen recently. Relisteds, I think, is an interesting one. Seeing a little spike in relistings. And you know what? I totally get that. Like, hey, we went out there, we whiffed. Like, we went for the gold. I think a lot of times these relistings is the agent going, okay, we tried it your way. Let's do it my way this time.
100%. Mm-hmm. That's also sometimes, while you're coughing, whenever you see a price range, I get that question a lot. Is like, why do they have a price range? Like, it's very simple. The seller wants the top of the range, and the real estate agent is saying, I'm not going to list it unless he's listed here. So let's compromise. We'll do a range. The reality is every buyer looking at a price range is always looking at that bottom number.
Of course. We could talk about price ranges probably for a whole show, because there's so many people, there's so many places in the world where they do it and it's normal, and it just comes around here every once in a while. Like, have you seen any price ranges the last 2 years? I mean,
very minimal, but they're there.
I haven't seen hardly any.
Yeah.
Starting to see them again. It does make sense. This is my favorite thing to look at, though, just to really get a feel for, okay, what's going on, the price per square foot. We were showing this earlier on the small chart, and we're seeing very steady, solid growth in price per square foot over the last 3 years. And we've seen some, spikes higher here in the 7-day average over the course of the last year. And now we've sort of leveled off. We've leveled off a little bit around the $700 a foot. And I remember before the crash, Dan, when places were selling for 500 a foot. And I remember thinking that this is insane, that this is just totally insane. I can't believe it. And these were like the nicest places in downtown would sell for 500 square foot. So I'm talking about like, high rises, 500 square foot. Now, you see pretty much anything detached in San Diego is going for around that. And the only exceptions are some of the places where you have to get in. If you're buying a 1,100 square foot home in Poway, you might pay more than that.
Sure.
But
or coastal areas or something like that.
Yeah. But overall, I mean, so for people who are bearish, and like I respect people who are bearish, we're going to talk about some of the bearish comments that came out today. That's next up on the list here. So don't you worry if you're a bear.
Let's go.
We're going there. We're definitely going there. If you're bearish, it's okay. It's okay to be bearish. So it's okay not to think everything's going to be all right. But I just want you to really look at sort of like, okay, crashes happen when things sneak up on people. Is this correction sneaking up on enough people? Are there really people who have no idea what's going on out there? Just looking at this is a very rounded top, which does, from a technical standpoint, make it look like, okay, you should probably be a little bit bearish, but there's definitely nothing that would be like, oh yeah, crash for sure.
What's the time range on this? I'm sorry, Derek.
This is 3 years.
Oh, it's 3 years. Okay.
Sorry. Yep, there it is. So this goes back to July 2019.
So you can see in just another thing to add on to this, the seasonal differences. You can see 3 or 2 kind of like little lumps in the middle where it kind of flattens out a little bit. You're going to see seasonal, and that's why I asked how many years, because with all these charts, just about all these charts, you're going to see some type of little bump naturally happen. And that's what we're seeing there at the top as well. It has to do with that, not just what's happening in the market, but a seasonality of it as well.
Very true. You're making a great point. I mean, if we go back to the Julys, let's say the June and Julys here from, let's say 2020, which was obviously a COVID year. So do we throw it out? I don't know. There's a lot of real estate going on.
So that was a hot summer, actually.
It's pretty hot.
It's crazy.
But here, if you look at June, July, it's kind of flat, choppy, up and down a little bit. Then come over here to 2021. Here's June and July again, also kind of flat and sideways. And then here we are again, June, July, kind of flat, maybe angling a little bit down.
It's more drastic for sure.
But yeah, you're right. The seasonality definitely matters. Okay, Bears, this is for you. By the way, we're live. If you want to drop a comment or say hi, we'd love to hear from you. So the banks reported today, and everyone's talking about JP Morgan. Jamie Dimon is kind of like the face of Wall Street banks. And he said a couple things today that's kind of stirred people up a little bit as, Chase reported a lot less on the revenue side than what people were hoping to see. It didn't crush the market, really didn't crush the market at all. But here's what they said. Here's what Jamie Dimon had to say. On one hand, he says, quote, the economy continues to grow and both the job market and consumer spending and their ability to spend remain healthy. So that sounds pretty good. Not that he is like the economic whisperer or anything, but when you work at a big bank, you get to see a lot of trends. You get to see a lot of spending habits. You have so much data. And he goes on to say, but here's the but, Dan. But geopolitical tension, high inflation, waning consumer confidence, the uncertainty about how high rates have to go, and the never before seen quantitative tightening and their effects on global liquidity are very likely to have negative consequences on the global economy sometime down the road. So what he's saying is, the tightening, the strengthening of the dollar, that definitely has, international implications from a currency standpoint. And what I thought was interesting, we'll get a little bit more data here. Let's see, where was it? Should have highlighted this to begin with, but bottom line is people were saying, hey, the revenues were down, 28%. And they are claiming that it's because they wanted to bolster reserves because they're expecting defaults. Okay. So I can't remember exactly where it is in here. Okay, here we go. So, no, that's not it. Anyway, so they basically said, hey, we are stashing cash because we're concerned that some of these loans that we have out there, or maybe this overall economy might get worse, and we're going to want to be in position. We want to be well capitalized if something bad happens. So, let me ask you this question, Dan. Now, if you hear, hey, someone is being fiscally responsible, just forget it's a bank. Say it's an individual. Hey, I think things might get bad down the road for some reason, so I'm going to stack some extra money in savings. Does that sound like someone who's going to get burned or someone who's going to be okay?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what you think, because especially right now when stocks are down, crypto is down, all like a lot of major investments that people are making are down. So if you have money, if you have cash set aside that you aren't worried about decreasing in value, of course we have inflation. Yeah, fiscally responsible.
I mean, I think this is a great sign. We did not, let's put it this way. Part of what caused the crash was that everyone was super leveraged, particularly the banks,
Yep.
Wall Street. Everyone was super leveraged. So you couldn't handle a very big move in the market before you were liquidated. And what they're doing here is they're saying, hey, our earnings fell 28% because we're building reserves for bad loans and we're not buying back any stock. So we're positioning ourselves to be ready to take a punch if one comes. And we didn't have any of that going on in 2008. Absolutely zero of this. Everyone was just full pedal to the metal. They were flooring it the whole time, never took the foot off the gas, went right into the wall. What he's doing here is he's pumping the brakes and he's saying, listen, we're going to be responsible. We're going to put money aside. We're going to protect ourselves. We're going to be in a good position. So it's things like that that people see and they go, oh man, see, there it is. They know the crash is coming. The crash is so much less likely to happen when people are prepared for it. And this is the reason why. By protecting yourself, by setting money aside, by being ready for defaults, you're now in a position where if defaults start to happen, you don't have the cascading effect. You don't have the triggers. You don't have the forced liquidations. You're in good position. So to me, seeing things like this is actually really, really good sign that a crash could be prevented should one come to the doorstep, versus looking at it and going, oh, see, this means the crash is on its way. The crash is much more likely to happen if this isn't happening. And we saw that. I got to see that live from a front row seat about 14 years ago. So to me, this is a good thing. And I'm going to stick to that.
You know what this is kind of reminding me of when you're talking about it in just a very different way is, anecdotally, I work with a lot of buyers. So I see firsthand the people that are waiting in line to buy homes and how everything that's happening right now is affecting them. And what I'm seeing is not people that have seen rates go up so much they can't afford homes, although there definitely are those people out there as well. There's no doubt. Some people are just, they can't afford the homes that they want anymore, so they decided to step back and either rent or stay where they're at and not relocate to San Diego. Majority of people that I have been in touch with, it's been very different. It's been, oh, well, we do have money that would be tight for us, but we're going to wait and see because there feels like there's uncertainty. So I want to like stash my cash for a moment, see what's going to happen with the market, because it's obviously not doing this right now. It's not going up like a rocket at this moment. So let's just take a moment and see what's going on. And then guess what's happening? People don't wait very long. I have the busiest week that I've had in at least 6 months because I've had people reaching back out and new buyers reaching out and saying, you know what, we're ready. We're seeing opportunities. We're seeing more homes on the market. We're finding what we want. We're seeing price reductions. We're not going to have to go 500,000 over asking. We might even get some seller credits thrown in there. And so for whatever reason, when you're saying that, it's exactly how I feel about a lot of the buyers and clients that I've been working with over the last couple of months.
Yeah, people are more savvy now. I've seen the exact same thing, by the way, in like I'd say last week and this week. So let's call it 2 weeks or week and a half. Where people who had been sidelined or people who are past clients are going, hey, I want to nibble at this. I see the opportunity. I'm seeing inventory. I'm seeing sellers being willing to negotiate, and I'm pretty sure I'll be able to refinance in a year or two. So I'm not like overly worried, about about if the rate isn't the lowest rate in history. If I can get a payment that I'm cool with and have upside on that down the road, should rates drop, people are starting to feel pretty good about it. So that's the thing, is like, don't underestimate the savvy. Like the savvy will beat you to it. If you want a deal, it's not going to fall in your lap. You're going to have to hustle for it. You're not going to be able to just to just sit there and go, oh, hey, someone knocked on my door and they said they have this great home for sale, this great deal.
Absolutely.
It's not happening. You have to be savvier, smarter, more on top of it. You got to beat people. There's a line of people who want deals on real estate. Okay. Now, those people might be taking a minute to take a breather and go, hey, let me see what's going to happen here. That's okay. If you want to do that, I totally understand that. But the more people who do that, those are our soldiers. They're holding a line, and they will hold a certain line, a certain level where they will want to jump in. And what's happening now, Dan, I think, is you're seeing the people who are like, we would call the early adopters on the bell curve, like the top 11% of people who are like, not necessarily risk takers, but they're not afraid to be the first one in the pool. Those are the people who are front running the market right now. They are front running all the sit, wait, and seers, front running them to get into homes and negotiate good deals for themselves so that they can, refinance in a year or two, maybe less, who knows, and put themselves in a great long-term position. I've been doing a lot of burrs too. A lot of people wanting to buy, renovate, refinance, repeat. A lot of that going on right now.
Well, those are motivated sellers, right? So that's what you need to find in this market, are the motivated sellers where you can actually find some deals.
Yeah. And there's motivated sellers out there. Just quickly here on interest rates. I don't think this is working. Okay, let me see if I can get this to work. So quickly on interest rates, we've seen just overall, I mean, we can zoom out a little bit. Let's go back to the first of the year. We can see like, okay, bond prices are definitely lower. There's no doubt about it. And we got a really bad inflation number yesterday, Dan. It was not pretty, not ideal.
It was not
what we wanted to see. There's no doubt about it. But is the worst behind us? Because since those numbers were taken, a lot of things have changed, particularly with the items that are a part of that number. And so if the next month we get a reading that's much lower and we continue to see that go down, what you're going to see is that is the beginning of a deflationary cycle. If that happens, money will flow into bonds like we haven't seen since the Federal Reserve, decided that they were going to get in. And I'm just not as quick to the gun with these sound effects here.
You still got a giggle out of me though, so that's
I gotta figure it out. We gotta find, the Federal Reserve is, when they were buying bonds, we saw some crazy candles. I mean, they were just market buying a certain dollar amount, didn't even care. They're just pushing the button. We would see candles like that. So right now on this graph, you can see I have two arrows going up and one going down. That's kind of what I think it is, probably the likelihood. Bonds will start to get sexy when deflation becomes a thing, because now you can say, well, I'm gonna park my money here for 4.5%, but I'm also making money off of my principal. So when we have deflation, that means the dollar is getting stronger. If the dollar is getting stronger, then even having it under your mattress, it's growing in value, right? So if I can put it into a bond where I get 4.5% plus I get whatever it's growing, deflating to on its own, it starts to make, things like fixed income bonds, CDs, even those kinds of things will do really well.
Sure.
So that could be closer to where we are now than what people may realize. Let's see here. Let's see if I can do this. I'm having trouble with my comments, Dan. Okay, I got one here. What's up, Anissa? She says, escrow here. Cancellations are way up. Okay, so she's in escrow. That's cool. Cancellations are way up, but escrows are opening, and they do come back in escrow, albeit it doesn't happen as fast. Okay. So she's seeing cancellations, and that's good. We've got inside info here from an escrow officer or someone who works for an escrow that, homes are canceling more often. And I think I can't remember if I told you about this one or not, Dan, but we had one that we offered 20,000 above list. They didn't have any other offers, and they declined our offer. Did I tell you about this one?
No, but I can guess where it's going.
So they said, then afterwards they said, hey, we have another offer. It's up at this level or whatever. And like, okay, yeah, we're out of here. And then they called back today and we went into escrow.
Oh, okay. That's great. So, that's not where I expected it to go.
So, well, it wasn't a cancellation, so it wasn't totally on topic, but my point was that, there are the sellers just don't have the same this particular agent was negotiating very hard for their seller, and I appreciate that. I really do.
Sure.
I really do. Even if it's a little bit out of bounds, I do appreciate it. At least they're working hard. They're trying to really do something for their
Absolutely.
seller, right? But we don't know if there was another offer or not. Who knows? I don't know if it actually got into escrow and came out. Not quite sure. But I do know that we got a call back within 48 hours and we're in escrow. So my point, I guess, to in saying that was that, buyers have what buyers have been begging for years now, which is the chance to actually like hold your ground, you know, and still win.
Yeah.
And that wasn't happening. We were not seeing that. You did not have a chance to like hold your ground. If you came in and the seller said, "Well, we want this," and you said, "No, I'm staying right here," someone was going to say yes. And now we don't have that. There is, what do you think about, so I'm just going to ask you some questions. I'm not getting my comments here to work for whatever reason. They're not populating through. I got to figure it out later. But I'm going to just ask you this question, like from a buyer standpoint. Every buyer wants a deal. Some buyers out there, they want to always write under list. That's just who they are.
Yep.
In this market where we're starting to see price reductions, come to play. When you're writing an offer, where do you start? I mean, it's hard to look at comps, right? Because those are past. Like, how do you determine? And is it okay to come in, under list or maybe even way under list if you think that's where the market is?
Yeah, it's interesting conversations right now and questions that I've been getting along this line of like I had someone ask me last night, when is okay to start asking under list? Like, how long do I have to wait? Well, this market that we've been in for the last 2 years has conditioned us that the first week of home seeing the market, don't even consider putting an offer under asking because there's no chance that you're going to get that accepted. At least wait until day 7 or day 10. And that was, more or less conversations I was having with my buyers. The reality is, it could be the same house that could be listed for $3 million or it could be listed for $500,000. It's up to the seller to decide what they want to list it at. So starting with just understanding a general idea of what the value of the home is and whether it feels like it's overpriced or underpriced is going to be really, really important. If it's your goal just to get a home under list price, that shouldn't be your goal. It should be your goal to get it under value. That's what you're looking for. But as far as, is it okay to put in offers under list price? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you have to wait 7 or 10 days anymore, but you do have to be in a situation where you're not desperate to get a house today or tomorrow or even this next week. This is the prime example of a market right now where you can get good opportunities, but you have to be a little bit patient and you have to maybe throw a couple out there before you actually get something accepted.
Yeah. How do you have a formula for or a feel or a way that you determine like what is the actual value of a property?
Yeah, and as far as here's the thing, over the last year, it's been really, really difficult to tell people what the value of a home is. And I can tell you, appraisers, they're just writing numbers they might as well be writing numbers on a piece of paper. Yes, there's actual equations that go into it, but it's so subjective. It's crazy. But if you're going off of old data, if you're going off of comparable properties that sold 2 months ago and they had an accepted offer 3 months ago, that's not good enough in changing markets. So usually I just frame it in the mindset of you as the buyer, what's your goal out of this? Are you desperate to get a house or are you desperate to get a deal? And then in those scenarios, you can find out all the data points, not just what other homes are selling for, but also how much activity is going on with that house. And in some properties, you can find out a decent amount about what's going on. You can show up to the open house. So you can see how many people are there. If they set it up so that there's online showings, I could go in and look and see how many people have booked online showings. And if there's only one showing and it's the first weekend, then, there's a very good chance that you can get this under asking if you wanted. If it's completely booked up over the weekend, which a year ago was happening, literally sometimes within 1 or 2 hours of a property being listed, they were completely booked up over the weekend. You couldn't even get in there. That's what was happening. So once you start weighing all of these different things, you start weighing what is important to the sellers, how motivated are they, then you can start to put together an offer that makes sense for you. And for everyone, it's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that process. And I tell you, it is one thing that should change, but won't, is the fact that the appraisers are getting the contract. If we really want to know, if we really want appraisers to do their job, you got to send them out there and go, what's that house worth? You tell us. We're not going to give you any numbers.
God, these last 2 years would have been a mess.
Right? But I mean,
I would have quit my job. That would have been tough, man.
There's no question. It's the realtor lobby that is keeping that in place.
Yeah.
Because if we were just trying to find out what stuff was worth, you wouldn't give the appraiser the number that everybody wants to hit.
Yeah.
The whole point of HVCC and everything that happened before the crash. So, but that's not going to happen. But however, that said, to me, the way I value real estate is based on what would it cost for me to create it? What would it cost to create this? What would it cost to build this, to buy the lot, to build it? How much time would it take? How much is your time worth? And if you'd use that way of valuing real estate, which is what I would just call like just ultra logical, then you're going to see that even with today's prices, before price reductions and like that, everything you look at is a great deal, just everything. Because recreating these homes, unless it's a dump or something where you're basically just buying the land anyway, the cost of land, the lack of it, the amount of time it takes to construct, the cost to construct,
the permit process,
every house is a good deal. It's like, and so people are like, well, that's why you're such a perma bull when it comes to real estate. No, I'm a perma bull because I look at the long-term chart and it goes up and to the right, and it has since beginning of time. So I'm good with that. I like that. But just the reality is, like, there's a lot of people and every time the market gets a little overpriced, or like, let's say we just see a boom in prices, people will come to me and say, hey, I want to build a house. I want to buy land. I want to build a house because I can save money doing that. And I've never met anyone who's built a house and saved money by doing it.
You are hitting the nail on the head right now. I get that all the time when the markets are shooting up. People think that's the value. Home prices are so high. Of course, it would cost me less money if I just built it myself. Well, guess what? A customized home that you are building yourself, a brand new home, is going to be more costly. Yeah, 100%.
It's going to be very expensive. You got to think about like the new home builders. Their homes are the most expensive inventory out there, and they're doing everything in dramatic bulk.
Yeah,
like dramatic bulk. Everything from lumber to tubs and tiles and everything. Huge bulk, and negotiating big discounts on that stuff. Getting the cheapest possible labor, and sometimes it really shows, unfortunately. But if you think you can do it more efficiently than they are, then you're really on a fool's errand. So not that I'm going to discourage people. If it's your dream to build a house, by golly, go right for it. I always give people, there's a guy, if anyone wants the guy's name, there's a guy at US Bank. So US Bank does land loans, construction loan to perm. They're one of the few places you can still get it done. I will give you his number. Just reach out to me and let me know. I never want to be the guy that kills someone's dream. Never. But at the same time, I have to be straight with you. I'm not going to lie to you about this. It is not the route to go. And when you start looking into it, usually what happens is I give people the information, they start looking into it, and then they realize like, okay, yeah, it would be much easier to just go buy a house that's already there. And spend a little bit customizing it, as opposed to trying to build something from scratch. So I don't know why I started talking about that, but it's because of appraisals. So if you look on your appraisal, and I don't necessarily trust that the appraisers are doing this 100% the way they should, but if you look on your appraisal, there's two things on there. There's the value approach or the comparable approach, and then there's the cost approach. The cost approach is supposed to take into account what it would take to actually build this home again from scratch. And so these days, you can tell they're mailing it in. It's too similar to the comparable approach. But back in the day, they actually used to do a little bit more work on this, and you could see like, whoa, it would cost like $825,000 to rebuild this $675,000 house. And you could see that. And so it was easier to be like, yo, that's a great smoking deal. Now you have to do a lot of this research on your own if you really want to see that. But it's interesting nonetheless. So
a great example of this too is, we're in a place that should be prime for ADUs, accessory dwelling units, granny flats, but there's nowhere near enough of them. The amount of people that reach out and they want a multi-unit property. I get a lot of people reaching out for that, but there just aren't a lot of them. And the reason is because even if you have a house that's on a perfectly flat lot, perfect space in the backyard to build an accessory dwelling unit, a building back there, it's going to cost you at least $300,000 for like the bare essentials, like a 600 square foot place to put a bed in a little kitchenette and a toilet, and that's about it. So yeah, it's definitely not cheap to build here. Everything's really expensive. Everything's gone up in price in the last couple of years, especially construction and labor.
Yeah, labor's so hard to find. But even though it would cost $300,000 for that 600 square foot, whatever, still probably a really wise investment.
Yeah.
When you just look at the cost per square foot, if the cost per square foot we just looked at was 700 and it costs you 300 a foot, to build or whatever, and you get some cash flow or Airbnb opportunities, there's definitely something there to take a look at. But, there's always opportunities here. It's really just about like, let's be honest with ourselves about what's going on. Let's stare some of this bad news in the face. Like, let's look at it and go, hey, demand for big mortgage is shrinking. Is this a red flag for a crash? The news is trying to tell people to cancel their escrows. Is this bad news? Or they're not trying to tell you to, but they want to show you how.
That is a funny one. I'm glad you.
Oh, it just kills me. People are backing out. There's cancellations going on. Finally, you could say. JP Morgan is saying, hey, there's a lot of things that we're preparing, we're bracing for impact here. Is that a bad thing? Or is it good that they're being prudent, that they're not wide open to get just screwed and need a government bailout should things turn? Mm-hmm. I think it's a really, really good sign. I watched the last crash happen, had a front row seat for it. No one was prepared. No one had reserves. Everybody was leveraged from Wall Street to the big banks. That's why Washington Mutual went away. That's why some of these other Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, all of these big banks got nuked because they didn't do this. They didn't do the prudent thing, build reserves to be in a solid financial position. So when I see the biggest bank in America doing that, I think awesome for multiple reasons. Number one, it's good for them. But number two, it sets an example. Now other CEOs need to look and see, are we doing the same thing? Are we prepared? What do we need to do to shore things up to make sure that we're in good shape? Make sure our shareholders are in good shape. Those things are all good things, in my opinion. And Dan, I just want to say, hey, I appreciate your time joining us today, sharing your knowledge. It's always great to have you. Guys, check out Dan's channel for sure. If you want information about the San Diego real estate market, I'll put a link in the description. He's doing tons of stuff in the field and just providing tons and tons of value there. So highly recommend it. Dan, really appreciate your time, brother.
Well, I appreciate being on, but I got to ask you, do we have time for one more question? Because I got one if you got it.
Yeah.
So I love where this conversation went. I like your thought process behind everything that we're talking about. It's such a unique conversation to have. But the question on people's mind right now, Derrick, is are home prices going to come down between now and the end of the year? What's going to happen? That's what everyone wants to know. What do you think is going to happen?
I do think that there will be certain areas where we'll see prices come down significantly. And those are some of the areas where things have maybe gone up a little too much too quick. Some of the I think you did one, or maybe it was like a year ago, or you're doing one soon, I think, about the worst areas to buy in, something like that.
I got one coming out this Friday, best and worst areas. And the place that appreciated the most in the last 12 months is a 50% increase in home values in 12 months.
Okay. So we have to look at some of those areas and see, like, okay, if it's gone up too much too quickly, then those areas might see bigger moves down. And if it's, but there's certain solid areas I think that are going to remain solid. The Powways, for example, I have a buyer in escrow, 1.8 million in a property there. and it's appropriate, at an appropriate price, and a really nice place. Certain areas are going to stay pretty strong. Overall, if you want to say, hey, what is the San Diego market going to look like? I'd say we're probably somewhere between 5 and 10% on average is what we'll see as a pullback. And I think that some of that is already in the cake here.
Yep.
Our price per square foot, as we notated there, down about 2%. So if we're looking at maybe 5 to 10% on average total, including some of the areas that are going to be the worst, and there might be some places where you see a 25 or 30% drop, that could happen. And in those pockets, and those will probably be really good buying opportunities, those pockets.
Sure.
But I do think that it's going to be a little bit scattered as we start to see the geography and the zip codes really matter again, where we kind of just took that off. Like buyers just kind of didn't worry about that. They're like, is it in San Diego? Is it a detached home? We're in.
Yeah, 100%.
That's over with.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
No, we did a YouTube live last night. I did one with my friend Bern McGovern here in San Diego, and we said the exact same thing. So we're saying like maybe 5 or 10% down by the end of the year. I think 12 months from now, we're going to be right back to where we're at. I think it's going to be a little bit down. People are already eyeing opportunities. They're already ready to start getting back into the market at a point where new homes hitting the market is naturally going to come down at this time of year. We're getting through summer. There's going to be less inventory coming on, and buyers are ready. There are people out waiting on the sidelines that are ready to get started here in the next couple of weeks. So I think, yes, we're going to see a little bit of a dip. I think it is going to be very much like you said, like a very good point of what areas make sense. What areas have the best school districts, because that's what people want. So those are still going to be high demand, but the places where people were settling, maybe they were going a little bit farther out than they actually really wanted to, or areas that not as good of school districts or not as good ranked school districts. Those are going to suffer the most. But if I'm predicting, I'm going to say 5 or 10% down by the end of the year, and we're going to be right back to where we're at right now. This time next year, so July of 2023.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how well does Hamul hold up, because it's done really, really well. It's done really, really well the last couple of years. Some of those places, Lakeside, some of the places that are a little further out that people traditionally, Julian, didn't want to go that far. But then we got this work from home life thing going, and then everybody's cool with it. Are they still going to be cool with it? Riverside County is also going to be an interesting one to watch. Certain areas like in Temecula, great schools and stuff, but you also have Murrieta and some other places that are a little bit further out, that, people have been buying homes there because they just couldn't get into the San Diego market, or they got priced out. Will they stick with it, or will they get to that point where I'd say about 1 in every 5 or 6 people who buy up there and commute will within a year say, I can't do this anymore.
Sure.
So we'll just see as people return to work, what's going to happen up there. But I think you're right about the core areas being really good and still probably being able to actually hold water, like Scripps Ranch, for example, probably going to be just fine. There's certain areas you probably won't see much at all. And if you do see an opportunity, you better jump on that sucker. But it will be interesting to unfold. And I look forward to chatting with you about it, brother, as it does.
Let's do it. Appreciate you, man.
Yes, same here. Take care, bro. Everybody, check out Dan's channel. Here, let me pop it up here.
Plus, you gotta have some outro music. Come on, you gotta get quicker the buttons here, Derrick.
I don't have any outro music, but I have the same music as the intro music, so I will go with that. You guys have a great night. Share this with your friends. Let's help make them smarter than everyone else. We'll see you soon.